Thanks for tuning in to watch The Ordinary Filmmaker. I've only got one news item to cover today, and that's leaked specifications for the Sony FX9 Mark II. You'll recall the FX9 came out, the Mark I that is, just about 2 years ago. Now these specs do come from Sony Alpha Rumors, so thanks for Sony Alpha Rumors for putting them out there, but if you read the page on Sony's site, Sony Alpha Rumors site, it doesn't give you much confidence. In fact, I would say that these aren't validated in any way whatsoever, and I'm going to give you my analysis a little bit further on, telling you why I think these are absolutely bogus. But for now, let's go ahead and take a look at those specifications. Now, the Sony FX9 Mark II, according to the leaked rumors from Sony Alpha Rumors, is going to have a 4K sensor, not 6K, but it will be back illuminated and it'll be HDR. So if I read this correctly, we're not going to be able to have 6K oversampled 4K. Now, the Mark I could do 4K at up to 60 frames per second, but it could actually push up to 180 frames per second in 2K. And this is a terrific camera. It supports 16-bit RAW, it does 10-bit 422, it has S-Log3, and it's got some really amazing auto modes. Now, some of you have heard me say this before, and I love autofocus because I do a lot of run and gun. In a studio setup, much like I'm shooting right now, well, you really wouldn't need auto anything. You can pretty well set everything up. I've got everything set. I've got my ISO set. I've got my f-stop. Everything is set except for the autofocus because it doesn't really miss. And it's kind of an experiment of mine to see if it's good enough that I can shoot with it all the time. And so far for the last year, the R5 has done a good enough job when shooting inside that I haven't had any, well, issues. So the FX9 is a terrific camera. I'm just going to take a look at some of the specs I noted down earlier. So yes, it does have 4-channel audio as well. And that's terrific because, well, you can take in multiple sources. So, and of course you can adjust the gain for those. So that's really, really good. It is using the Sony E-mount dual base ISO for up to 102,400, and that's HLG mode. And one of the things I really like about this camera, it's variable neutral density filters. It only goes up to 7 stops, and some of you might think, well, you know, there's others that will do better. This isn't that good. And this is where you really need to stop looking at just the specs and look at the outcome. What I really like about this camera is its ability to, well, regardless of what you're doing, if you're doing run and gun work, you set it to automatic mode, and it's very, very fast. It's very, very efficient. It can very quickly change, and it's very, very smooth at doing it that I think the results, the benefits, far more outweigh the negatives, and I think it just does a terrific job. But the FX9 isn't all roses. Now, I do love the autofocus system that Sony's developed. I think Sony and Canon are the best when it comes to an autofocus system. And the face detect in the FX9 is very, very good. Again, it's very smooth. And if I was shooting with the FX9, for example, right now, and I took my head out of frame, and I can't, I'm moving it off the side, but imagine I could take my head right out of the frame. The FX9 would hold the focus, bring it back in, and you know, it wouldn't do any of that hunting, which is really, really nice. However, if you're one of those people that likes to overexpose, you want to reduce the noise and that kind of stuff, and you're shooting in S-Log3 as the FX9 has, well, you're going to have some problems. It's just going to not know what to do. The image is going to be too flat for it to pull focus. And I think this has something to do with the processing workflow. So essentially, if you're in face-only mode on the FX9, which does work very, very well, but if you're overexposed by just a single stop, well, you've lost that face-only, I was going to say face detect, face-only autofocus. And this essentially puts you in manual mode. Now, if you're out doing run and gun stuff, well, that's probably not going to be beneficial to you. So that is one of the minor things on the camera. And one other minor thing I'm going to bring up, and I'll probably get some comments on this because I'm really getting nitpicky with this, is how you can white balance with this camera. Now, first of all, I think this is more of a benefit. If you put a white balance card right in front of the camera, it can automatically white balance right off of that. None of this, take a picture, bring it in, make some adjustments, take it out, do some other adjustments, bring it in, and you know, before you know it, like Canon R5, you've finally got it. But there is a small issue with this. If your white balance doesn't take up the full frame of the camera. It can do some really strange things and not give you a white balance at all. It can completely give you a matrix look or something else. Man, I'd like to see that fixed. But, you know, it's a terrific camera. Now, one thing I am going to pick on is the stabilization. Now, this camera, you're right, doesn't have stabilization. But Sony talks about their Catalyst browse software that in post will stabilize video. I think it's terrible. Now, here's my thought on stabilization. If you want stable video, you need to think of your gear, where you're shooting, what scenario you're going to be in. And if you want to have smooth flight video, well, maybe you need to think of different hardware. Maybe get a gimbal that will allow you to get that smooth, cinematic smooth video, and then the camera's IBIS can take out some of the small bumps. And then, only then in post, you know, choose to remove stabilization if you wish. But I think there's far better options for stabilization in terms of software than Sony's own software. Premiere does a better job with Warp, and even Final Cut Pro's image stabilization stabilization feature is better. As always, you want to get the stuff done right in production so you don't have to try and fix it in post. And the problems with the software, you tend to get warping, you get softer images. And the problem with doing a lot of run and gun stuff work is quite often you're not thinking of heel and toe. Sometimes you're taking heavy steps, and that jars the sensor. So without any sort of gimbal hardware to soften that, you're not going to get great results in post. And one last thing, I got to say, I think for $2,000 more, the FX9 is a better camera than the FX7. But now let's go ahead and take a look at the rumored specs again and see where there's a big problem. Now, the first thing is the sensor. Let me read this again and make sure I got it correct. It is a new sensor. It's a DCI 4K HDR back illuminated sensor. Back illuminated, sure, that makes sense. HDR, yeah, I'm willing to go with that. But that this tops out at 4K? Now, maybe they're doing some magic like they did with the A7S III to give you a lot of detail. But why would you go from a camera that could do 6K oversampled 4K down to just 4K? I really think that this camera, 2 years later, with everything that's on the market, needs to be able to do, because this camera costs $11,000, it needs to be able to do at least 6K video at the top end, in camera, internally, without some sort of expensive external recorder. And that's something else that I have a problem with this set of leaked, so-called leaked specs as well. It's got an improved external recorder. The first one costs $2,500 to be able to record raw internally. Well, what I think should happen is they should provide raw video output over SDI. None of this stupid, external recorder. And I bet you if it is a new external recorder, and I don't think there is going to be one, it's going to be more expensive than the $2,500 one, because everything we've seen in the last 2 years, due to the chip shortage, well, things have gotten more expensive. So I really have a big problem with that. Other things I would like to see in this new camera is new codecs. I would like to see them fix some of the issues I talked about with the autofocus. Now let's pause for a minute here. Sony just released the Alpha 1 back in January and the A7S III back in August of last year. And if you overexpose by a stop, you don't have any issues with face detect autofocus completely going away. So I think the issue is a pretty simple one to fix. And I think that issue can easily be fixed in this updated camera. And the white balance easily fixed as well. And I think if you fix these issues, give us 6K video, I think it's going to be a terrific camera. Also, the rumor says we're supposed to be getting it this year. That's 2 years after the Mark I. 2 years. Okay, so we waited 5 years for the A7S III. The last time, I think we had to wait 3 years for the A7S II. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it might be a little bit less than that. And the A7 IV, well, we're still waiting for that camera, and it's been about 3.5 years. So for some reason, Sony's decided after 2 years to give this camera an update. It's certainly plausible. But that, along with these specifications, have me saying, you know what, I don't believe this one bit whatsoever. I think Sony got this rumor from somebody that just wants to see if they can get on the news page, to see if they can influence, to get clicks. This isn't validated, and in my view, this doesn't carry any water. I think this is just total hogwash. And you know what? I'm far more interested to see what Sony's going to be doing with the A7 IV, which I did a video on just yesterday. So that's it for now. I'm not going to go into any more detail ranting about how bad some rumors can be. It's tough enough getting credible rumors on Sony products because Sony does a really good job of hiding them. And then to get a rumor like this, which clearly is unvalidated and not worth the, I was going to say paper it's printed on, but the screen that it's written on, I should say, or, well, you know what I'm trying to say. Anyhow, one last thing before I go. Again, please, if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so. It really does help this channel grow. It's something to do with engagement. Whether you click like or dislike, write a comment and subscribe. All those things show that you're engaging, and it somehow fits into YouTube's algorithm saying, hey, go ahead and watch my content, and they're going to show more people my thumbnails, and the channel's going to grow better. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.